Welcome to Self-Perfected.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
All right, we're here. We're live.
Coming in hot.
Let's go.
Welcome.
All right.
Welcome.
Hey, how's my sound?
You sound great. How does my sound sound?
Eh,
The best
not as
podcasts are where the
rich and
beginning of it
resonant
is a sound check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know it's gonna
Like-
be
like
you know-
Drake. You got a radio voice,
Yeah.
but it didn't sound like a radio voice.
Oh no.
Make it sound like a radio voice.
Hang on. Let me
Okay, that's
mess
a
with
little
the
better.
audio a little bit. Wait a minute.
When you were
I
a kid,
I
did you
didn't do
ever
anything.
wonder?
Uh-huh.
Did you ever wonder why you couldn't hear the radio waves?
Like
just
why you
floating
needed
around.
to turn on a radio instead of just being able to listen to it.
Yeah, it's like, why can't you just hear them?
Well, that would be that you actually can, but it's subconscious, and that's what harp is, Cameron. Okay, did you do your research?
I played the violin growing up, but the harp looked way
No,
too
the
hard.
harp. Capitals.
Sorry,
Okay.
you gotta repeat the A. You gotta hold the A out.
Did
longer.
you
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
play the violin?
Yeah.
You gotta whale it.
Arp.
Whale it. You gotta get on a
Really?
tractor,
Can't really
right, Drake?
picture Cameron.
You gotta get on a
Yeah.
tractor and then you gotta just
What
whale
were you
it.
doing
Just-
there, Christine?
Playing the violin.
It didn't look like you were like trying to like eat some pasta or something. What you're doing?
That's how they do it.
That's how we
Yeah.
play the violin here. We eat pasta while you string the bow.
I've never even tried to play violin. Has anyone here ever tried to play violin?
I tried.
Yes, I just told you I played the violin.
It's like-
You
Where you
actually
been?
did.
Yes,
It's hard to
Really?
believe.
I have a hard time believing that.
That's what I'm
I-
saying.
why?
I need some
It's just an
picture
instrument.
evidence.
No, I can see him playing the violin.
uh,
At least
dainty.
trying.
I probably have some
Violin
in
is
some
very
random
dainty.
scrap.
I guess
somewhere.
okay. I have this image in my mind of Cameron as a child as just being like this kind of distraught, pissed, sarcastic kid. So you playing the violin, I just picture
with
you
a violin.
It's not
I played it very
inaccurate.
sarcastically.
I picture you like crying as a child, just kind of like all the
Picture you
time,
more
but
like
then,
a
like
trumpet kind of
suppressing
guy.
it.
Or a bass. I can see you playing bass.
Bass?
yeah.
Like
eh,
wait,
no.
bass guitar or
No,
bass
like the big
like a standard
guitar.
bass?
Yeah,
I could
I
see him
tried to
having
play the
long hair.
bass. I tried to
I
play the
could-
bass as like a transition point, but it was so different than the violin. It was so big and like hard to press everything down. I was like, fuck this. It
I
was
could
just such a
not see
different.
Cam playing the
I
standard
couldn't see that
bass.
either. I could see him playing guitar in like a grunge band
Yeah, I could see that.
for a while.
You ever
For
you ever
sure.
watch Mitch? You ever watch Adventure Time?
I have seen a couple episodes.
Never mind. You're not gonna get that.
Why does he like the dog?
Never mind. Just never mind. Just let's
You
keep
know,
it
he'd be like the
going.
main kid.
let's keep it.
Ben?
That's
No.
I'd be LSP.
There we go. There we go. Or Tiffany. You remember Tiffany?
I don't know, Tiffany.
Okay, all right. See, it's a small reference. Mitch, you had some movie recommendations for us this week.
I did. Okay. So
His
I
number
never
one Sound of
knew-
Freedom.
No, not Sound. I haven't seen Sound of Freedom.
Me neither.
Have you, Cameron?
No.
Yeah, I heard it was a QAnon conspiracy, so don't watch that.
Yeah.
But the
definitely
JP
not.
Sears thing on it was actually pretty interesting. Okay. So there's a movie called The Departed. I had never seen this, but I'd heard about it from so many people. I used to live in Boston, and people are like, "Oh, The Departed." I'm like, "Yeah, I've never seen that movie." Now I watched the movie. I was like, "Holy shit, that's like crazy." Have y'all seen this movie?
Let me
It's
look it up.
yeah, it's the one. What's that guy's name?
Matt Damon and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay, yeah. I
Okay,
recognize
Matt
that, yeah.
Damon.
And
Matt
then
Damon.
I don't know the name of the main like crime lord guy, mafia boss, but that actor is in it, and it was
Jack Nicholson.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that shit was great. It got my heart rate up for sure. I was watching, and then near the end, you're just like, oh, because me and Jess, we were like trying to watch it the other night, and then like Aristotle got up in the other room, so we just went to bed. So it was hanging over my head for a few days. So I'm like getting phone calls from people. I was like, shit. No, I'm just kidding. But it was really fascinating because I saw the dynamics of a story where there's like all these different angles happening, and I saw how it could hook somebody with your attention, and I really enjoyed that. And then the very end,
And then
I
they
won't
bury
spoil.
him. Okay, all right. There are certain actors that I can't tell them apart. Like, which one's the one in Good Will Hunting? Is that
I've
also
definitely
Matt,
never seen that movie.
is that also Matt Damon?
Robin Williams.
Yeah, I can never tell those two apart.
It's Matt Damon and I think Mark Wahlberg. They're pretty much the same person to me. That
Oh,
one.
Ben Affleck.
Oh yeah, Mark
Oh,
Wahlberg.
it was Ben
in The Departed
Affleck.
too.
You can rope him
Yeah.
in that too. You can just rope him right in with all those
And then
guys.
Tom Cruise.
And who plays Jason Bourne? Who plays Jason Bourne?
Matt
Matt
Damon.
Damon.
Okay, all right. So yeah, just rope all of them. They're all together. They're the same guy. And then
I can never get Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks like straight in my mind.
well, they're quite different.
Really? Tom Hanks is the
They're quite
pedophile.
Literally, that was my thought in my head right now.
What?
And
I
then
have
Tom
not heard
Cruise is the one on
conspiracy.
Oprah jumping. Yeah.
You have
Hold
not
on.
heard that
Allegedly,
QAnon?
right, Mitch? Allegedly.
It's that
Oh, yeah.
I've been
QAnon.
watching too much Sound of Freedom.
Wait, okay.
I
don't
told you I
understand.
haven't seen Sound of Freedom.
What's that conspiracy theory?
What,
No, that
Tom
was
Hanks?
that at the beginning of
Peter?
like COVID, like Tom Hanks got COVID meant that he was arrested and like all this.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't remember that?
I remember.
And, like,
Yeah, I
that, was,
do.
that was when
Jenner's-
Fall of
That's
Cabal
when
came
just-
out.
That's when people just go off the deep end, man. It's
Oh
like,
yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Yeah. Fall of Cabal. That was like, I think that was actually like a QAnon like proper film.
Okay,
Was it?
Gerard Butler, and then the other one is
Oh, Gerard Butler is
He's the same
in
guy
300 only.
Yeah,
as
300.
Russell
he's
Crowe.
the same Russell Crowe. That's the one. Thanks.
Oh, have you ever seen 310 to Yuma?
See, Cam knows. He knows.
Really? We watched that in a philosophy class. That was in it. That was like, you know how Cameron, you had that one cool teacher who's like did math or something. I had one kind of cool teacher who taught philosophy, and I couldn't read because I was a high school student. So I was like, didn't fully appreciate it, but he had us watch 310 to Yuma, and he taught us about like a few things that I understood. That was pretty cool because each character is symbolic of a different philosophy in that movie, and it was like pretty
No, I've
fucking
never
good.
seen that movie. Never seen that
Really?
movie.
Oh, you should
No.
watch it. It's fucking good.
Just
Okay.
sent us her whole a whole list of her favorite movies as a kid growing up.
Who's
And
Sandra did?
It's like more than 20 movies.
No,
That's
Justin.
insane. I
Oh,
don't even think I've
Justin.
seen 20 movies in my life. But okay,
20
whenever
You
I go to
haven't seen 20
Jefferson,
movies.
okay, I've
I've
watched
seen
Mighty
20
Ducks
Ninja
D2
Turtle
over
movies.
20 times. That was as a child.
Wait a minute.
I
Wait a
had
minute.
obsessive compulsive disorder.
Mitchell, I get my movie recommendations from you. What do you mean you haven't seen over 20
Okay,
movies?
hang on. Whenever I go to Jefferson, Texas, I feel like I'm in 310 to Yuma. It's pretty fucking cool because there's a
Alright.
train, there's a Western stuff. I feel like I'm going to see someone standing on the roof at that saloon where everyone's smoking cigarettes, and they're going to like pull out a revolver and just start shooting.
There's a saloon in
pretty
Jefferson
much
where everyone
happens.
smokes
There
cigarettes.
is a saloon.
Auntie
There's a-
Skinner's, what the
Yeah.
fuck? Did you not go downtown?
It's more
No,
of a
I-
riverboat club, but
I don't
we think
remember
of it
this
as a
place.
saloon.
That's in Jefferson?
Yeah,
I don't
it's the one
remember.
where I don't eat there because they're like literally smoking cigarettes in the restaurant. But
Okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
like they have smoked bacon, but it's literally just cigarette smoke.
it's like made by Marlboros. You get to decide if it has menthol in it or not
Or
menthol.
camels.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So what are we actually going to talk about today?
So for those of you who are still with us,
See, we're like we're like the Bernard audios. We just repel you unless you're really serious.
Well, it's like, there's some music in the
Repel you
beginning that
with
you
movie
really
recommendations.
don't want to listen to. And then you're like, all right, let's get to the good part. Yeah. So
Is that how you explain your guys' music recommendations? Because I actually like your music.
no, our music
Right.
recommendations are great. First of all.
Okay. I just needed some clarification.
I don't know if you've ever listened to any of Cameron's music recommendations.
I have definitely.
Really?
Terrible.
I'll give you some more.
Drexia.
Oh, Drexia. Okay, well that's different. That's different. That's an actual music recommendation.
Hey, lately I've been listening to a lot of Dave Brubeck.
What kind of music is this?
Yeah, refresh
Jazz,
me.
jazz.
Jazz?
It's like piano.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he also does like trio stuff with like bass and saxophone or whatever. But it's pretty good. Like there's a really famous album called Time Out. I think it's called Time Out. But yeah,
Oh.
good stuff.
Brubeck?
man.
How do you spell
Dave
it?
Brubeck. There's this one song. There's one piece.
How do you
on
spell
there
it? How do you spell it?
Brubeck.
Yeah, there's this one track on there called Everybody's Jumping. and it's like on the B side. And so
Uh-huh.
I'd never really listened to. We have the record, and I was, sometimes we'll put on like jazz music at dinner, just as like a nice relaxing background music. And I put
And
that
that one's
on,
like,
and a lot of
music
times,
is a dance, dun, 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 dun,
no,
dun, dun, dun,
it's
dun.
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah.
sort of a beat
Everyone's
with
trying to
that.
eat dinner, but everyone's jumping around.
Yeah.
What?
That's that song.
No, but it's cool because like a lot of times I'll find stuff I really like because I'm not paying attention to it, and I hear it in the background, and then I'm like, oh fuck, I get that now. Like it kind of
Mm.
sinks in. I don't know if
Oh,
you ever
I was
experienced that with
literally
music.
thinking about that yesterday. Because I was
Yeah.
like, I was noticing as a kid, I was actually thinking about it in the context of when you're going to when back in the day when I would go to a concert, I would want to know like the main songs of the artist. But before you go, I had like resistance to listening to some of it. And then after you go to the concert, because it's in like a special experience, sometimes
Yeah.
then it becomes your favorite song. Or even before.
Sure. Yeah.
But then I was like, why is that happening? And then I remember all these songs that used to be my favorite songs. At one point, they weren't your favorite song. So I was like, what happened in that moment where you're like, I love this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Music, it's sound, and it definitely has a sort of effect on you. And I've noticed when I listen to something in a very like conscious way, it's hard to enjoy it until it's already sunk into the subconscious point. And then you can listen to it. And for me, anyways, I don't know if everybody else experiences this, but
Yeah.
like there's a lot of music where I'll listen to it like on purpose, and I'm like, I don't like this, I don't get it, I don't enjoy it. And then for whatever reason, I hear it later. Like, let's say I'm in a car trip, okay, or something like that, and I'm just listening to some music, so I'm not really paying attention to it. And then I'm like, oh, like one who's like that is Gary Wilson.
Oh yeah.
Gary Wilson. Anybody can look up Gary Wilson. There's this song called 6.4 equals makeout, which the name makes zero sense. The song makes not a lot of sense. And when I first listened to it, I was like, this guy can't fucking sing. It's weird. It's almost like he's deliberately trying to sound bad, or he just really sucks. But then, so that I'm just telling you my conscious thoughts, okay, when I first listened to it. And I must have listened to it 5 different times over like 5 years, like kind of going back to it. Because for me, I this is just like a personal point. Like I like things that are very obscure. It does, like, being obscure in itself doesn't mean I like it. But I find that because it's obscure because it's not popular. I mean, obviously, right? But what I find is that a lot of popular stuff is it's just like, how can I explain it? It's like going to McDonald's versus having like a really good meal at some like really great burger place that like really does a good job on the burger. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, what the average people like, think about what's going to be on the radio, right?
Okay.
Doesn't mean
Here's a
there
technical
can't be
question.
something that's also good on the radio, but generally, yeah.
1 to 100, how obscure is 100 gex?
I don't think I don't know. The problem is now everything is fucking obscure. Like there's so much out there, so like it is, but it isn't, because it's popular among a certain group,
Whoa.
But anyway, so point I'm trying to
Meta.
make is like, I would listen to it over and over, like not over and over, like a few times here and there, but I'd always be like, I don't like this. And then I think there was like a car trip we took, and I was like looking for like, okay, what's some weird stuff that I haven't listened to that I don't like, but I know there was something to it, or maybe something would be recommended, or I'd see something about it. And then I would listen to it kind of in the background, and then it would sink in. And then I'd be like, oh, I get it now. It's like a weird experience. It's like because it goes into your memory, then it becomes a part of you, and suddenly you can identify with it. It's kind of interesting point. But Gary Wilson was one of those where like when I listen to it now, I'm like, oh dude, I totally get this. This guy's actually a great singer. He knows how to produce music. Like he's a great instrumentalist. Like he knows how to compose songs. Like they sound really good. They're like very technically very good. But I couldn't hear that initially at all. All I could hear, it's kind of like, okay, we were talking about RFK Jr. last time. Like imagine you listen to RFK Jr. for the first time and all you hear is his weird voice. And you're like, yeah, and you're like, and yeah, I don't know about this. It's kind of like you said with Bernard, same thing. It's like if you listen the first time and you're like, I don't know, this guy sounds really weird and negative, and his voice is weird and he's cussing a lot. Like you don't appreciate any of the depth of it. You see what I mean? So you have to
Yeah.
either expose yourself to it a lot or kind of like not, it's not that you don't think, okay, because I know someone's gonna take that out of context, like, oh, you don't want people to think for themselves or something. It's not that. It's just sometimes you're putting up a barrier based on some weird thing. Like for example, like last time on the podcast, you were talking, Drake, about how you didn't like RFK Jr.'s voice, which I understand. But I'm like, I literally don't care. It doesn't bother me at all. Like, I mean, maybe the first time I heard him, I was like, this is weird. But I understood what it was. It was explained. And plus I had listened to Scott Adams talk about his whole issue with that dysphonia or whatever the fuck it's called, right? So I'm just like, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't even hear it anymore as like a weird voice. And actually I saw him talking to
Joe
who was he
Rogan.
talk? No, it wasn't Joe Rogan. Who was it? He was talking to someone recently. Damn, I can't remember. I'll probably remember who it was.
My
But-
uncle and my brother. And my
See,
father.
but they asked him about it, and he was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I don't like my voice either." He's like, "I hate it," and he's
Oh,
like, "And
so-
I feel," and he's like, "I'm sorry. I feel bad for everybody who has to listen to it." He's like, "I will not listen to this interview afterwards." Right, and the guy was
Damn.
like asking him though, like he's like, kind of
Wow.
asking him more about it, and he was like, if you go and you speak for a lot, does it cause a problem? He's like, no. He's like, there's nothing wrong with my vocal cords. He's like, it's a neurological point that like my brain is constantly telling them to tighten up. He said, but I can speak. He said, I can speak for 20 hours. And he said, the more I speak, the stronger my voice gets. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And then when you really look at the point of you're deciding like to run for president and you have this problem and you're like, wouldn't your first thought be like, well, no one's going to fucking listen to me at all?
That was my
Wouldn't that be
first
your
thought.
first obvious point? And yet he didn't stop.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say like, oh, everybody support this guy. I'm just saying like the courage, if you want to look at it that way, of like, yeah, my voice sucks. I can barely speak. People are going to think it's weird, but it doesn't really matter, because what I'm saying is what matters. Because people can get caught up in the whole like, appearance of things, the way something's marketed. Like think about all the shit you see that's marketed online that's really slick and cool, but it's like just bullshit. You know what I mean? Like you can focus on all that stuff and not have any substance. If you have substance, you can get better at the other stuff. So that's my sales pitch for Gary Wilson. Check it out. He's got a lot of really great stuff. He made a resurgence back in the 2000s, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Back to movie recommendations.
No, it's not a movie.
No, that's
My
okay.
movie recommendation is an album by Gary Wilson called You Don't Really Know Me. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Hey, wow. Wow, what a name.
Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you some more about him real quick. It's really interesting. He has this weird aesthetic. He's basically like this weird loser guy who gets super hyper obsessed on girls. Like it's like he's a guy, like a man, but he still thinks of women as like girls. Not like pedo shit, but like, like high school level, like, girls, right? And not that he's attracted to high school girls. I'm saying like his mindset is like a high school boy's mindset, sort of about love and relationship, right? So he's like almost like this paranoid, obsessive guy. And so all his songs are about some girl who's basically scorned him or something, but not like he's not like really upset about it. It's more like he's obsessed with like, why didn't she like me kind of a thing. And his live shows, he comes out on stage and he like has all these mannequins and those are like his girlfriends. And then you realize when you listen to his music, all the women he's talking about in the songs are actually the mannequins. They're not actually even real women. So he's like obsessed with these mannequins. And it's really good. Like, how would you describe the music? It's like jazz? It's not really jazz. It's like,
It's more like, how would you describe Prince's music? It's kind of like,
it's not even that. It's like,
it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that synth poppy
mm,
of the 80s. That's how I would describe
no,
it.
dude, it's not that at all. No,
Yeah, it is. No,
no,
definitely.
no.
Yeah, maybe not like it's not like Tears for Fears level, but it's
What? No.
definitely.
I think you're thinking of something totally different thing.
No, I'm thinking of
It's the other Gary Wilson.
I'm thinking of Gary
Hold on.
Wilson. 6.4.
Wait.
6.4.
Let me play just like a little clip for something. That's not weird. You
You're
guys
gonna get
can
us.
have some.
Well, hey, hang on,
No,
Don't
it
play
doesn't
any
matter.
clips. Don't
It's
don't
called
play.
I'm gonna do it.
It's
I'm doing it right
not
now.
gonna allow us.
I'm doing it right now. Here, I'm doing it right now. It's kind of like jazz.
A little bit.
It's called new wave rock funk jazz.
All right, I think that's enough for the algorithm.
New wave.
Yeah, but my point is not like pop. Anyways, so
Yeah.
for those of you who are still with us, don't worry, we're gonna get to the good stuff.
What good
filtering.
stuff?
We're still filtering.
I'm kidding.
Dude,
Um,
did you guys
yeah.
watch that video I sent y'all? The soft white underbelly.
Yes, I watched the first half of it with Christine.
It was the X trans.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Mitch, no.
did you watch it, Mitch?
Not yet. No. What
I'm
is
gonna
it?
Okay,
spoil it for you.
after you're done watching Departed again,
I'm definitely never gonna watch Depart again. I already know what happens. Waste of fucking time.
But yeah, it was really sad. It was really sad because everybody's talking about right now with the Sound of Freedom and all the things that's going on with that, which is basically like we need to stop the pedophilia, right, in foreign countries and things like that, right? But this guy talked about how he seemed like he grew up in the 90s actually, so it seemed like millennial age, but he was talking about how his family on the outside looked pretty normal, but in his home he was being abused on a pretty regular basis.
like some serious shit, man. Like I thought my childhood was bad. It was nothing.
Seriously.
It was nothing. I'm like, I have nothing to complain about. I mean, that doesn't justify like bullshit that happened in my childhood, but
Yeah, and the way
Like-
that he described it, it was like it was almost like it was just normal. Like it was like, yeah, some things happened, and I thought
yeah,
it
but
was
he
normal.
wasn't saying it like it is normal. He knew
No,
it was-
well, he was saying it like
he was able
well,
to talk about it.
He was able to talk about it. He suppressed it until he was in his teens, and then started
Like-
talking to other people and realized like, oh, okay, so that's not okay.
Like I'll give this one point. Like he talked about, so I don't watch the whole thing. I watched part of it because I'm watching so many different ones. But I watched up to the point. So the guy was, I didn't really hear the trans part yet. I didn't hear any of
okay.
that. Did you listen to that part?
Yeah.
Can you get some
Basically,
context on that? Because I didn't hear that yet.
so he said the way he described it actually was really practical too. He was like, I had just gender dysphoria, dated a guy, and thought of myself as a woman until a lot of these memories started coming back up, and I realized like the gender dysphoria was because of the way that I was treated as a child. And he said that his father would have him wear a bunch of different outfits, and
Mhm.
like one of the outfits was like a puppy outfit, which was actually just him naked with a collar on, and then the
Jesus.
other outfit was like him wearing a dress, or him wearing like like a little sailor outfit or something like that, and like they would dress him up in different outfits before abusing him. And so
And he said like his dad would take him to hotel rooms or something with like another guy, and they would like basically like rape and abuse the kid, and like not only like sexual abuse, like kind of like a torturing sort of a thing as well. And he described how there was this one point, I guess he was older when the dad did this, but he had recorded him when he was younger, I guess, being like sexually tortured, like the kid. And like then he would make the kid, when he was, I guess he was like older, make him listen to it. And like
Yeah.
he was like, it would just sounded like someone like gurgling and screaming, and like, and he would like make the kid listen to it and then just like kind of laugh and be like, oh yeah, you don't like that, do you? You don't like listening to that. I mean, like some fucking dark shit.
yeah.
And so it's not to downplay the child trafficking stuff, but then you're like, even just in quote unquote normal families, you see all of this fucking abuse, and you're like, and I don't want to say it, it's not about like excusing what the person is doing to the child. You have to also look at how did that person become that person to do that?
Right.
And like all of the points in our world that like sort of culminate for that person to become that person. And yes, there is a point of choice within things, but then look how hard it is, even for everyone listening to this, how hard it is to change your programming on what is seemingly in comparison little things. It's not really little in comparison. Like programming is programming, whether it's that shit or whether it's something else that seems kind of benign. It's hard to change. It's because of the self-honesty required. And it's like, I was looking at this point recently of like all of the suppressed guilt that we have over all the mistakes that we perceive that we've made, that we don't want to forgive ourselves to a certain degree. It's like, but then it also becomes like an excuse to not have to change. Like if you're honest with yourself, if you forgive yourself and you're honest with yourself, then you see you have to change. And so it can be easy to look at a lot of evil stuff and be like, oh, well, I'm not that bad.
Right.
And so, yes, okay, you're not doing those things, but then look at the whole context of our entire world, our entire system, as to how it supports that stuff. I really recommend everybody listening to take a week or so, or a couple days or whatever, a day, and just listen to some of the soft white underbelly videos. Because I've been watching some of the ones from like other channels where it's like they're just interviewing people on the street, like prostitutes, people addicted to drugs and stuff. And those are really cool from the perspective of showing you like that side of things, but they're more, that's like they're on the street, they're more just getting the perspective of why is the person addicted and so forth. You don't usually get into really deep points about their life, but the soft white underbelly ones, generally the people like really open up and like give like a lot of what happened to them. And did you see the one, Drake? I don't know how many you've seen. Did you watch the one about the guy who was a clown?
No, I haven't seen that one.
That one I really highly recommend people watch. It was really fascinating. This guy, he was OCD. He was OCD. And he was talking about how the OCD, what it was, and it's not like he understood why it was happening. It was more just he was describing what it was, how he experienced it and so forth. But he explained how when he was even like 5 years old, he would have these negative thoughts that would come up of like something bad is going to happen, like to somebody he loves or just somebody, and then the only way he could figure out how to not focus on that thought was to focus on something that was kind of like an antidote to it. And I'm kind of using my own words with that.
Yeah.
It was like for example, he would have to pick something up like 12 times. For some reason, the number 12 like became like the number that he had to do. And then he had all these other points, like he couldn't do like the number 3. So because like 3 was associated with 13, and 13 was like a bad, it's like unlucky. So he's programmed with the idea of 13 being unlucky.
Yeah.
So if he had some negative thought, he would have to like counter it with something else. Right. And then, but that wouldn't be enough. He said, because the first time you do something, it's really powerful. It's more powerful. So if I only counted it 1 time, that's not enough. So I have to do it 2 times. I have to do the other thing 2 times, like whatever the thing was. Like, for example, let's say he thought like, oh, my mom's going to die in a car accident. He'd have to be like, my mom's not going to die in a car accident. I'm going to save her. My mom's not going to die in a car accident. I'm going to save her. Like he would have to say that to himself or something as an example. But then he said that was 3 times because there was the 1 plus the other 2. So now he had the number 3. So now he had to do it again. But then the problem is he did that 3 times plus the other one. So that's 4, but it's still got the 3 in it. So he was showing like how the mind would just be like this crazy fucking thing going on inside of him. Yeah. And so when he was young, he went to some kind of place. I forget how you described it, but some kind of place, like a psychiatric type place or whatever, or psychologist or whatever. And he said, so when he was like 5 or something, and then because, and I don't think even anybody knew what was going on really. It was like he was depressed, anxious, something like that. And they took him there, and he said when he went to the psychologist or whatever, they were basically like, when you have these negative thoughts, just give yourself a positive thought to replace it. Right. And he was like, that's what I'm fucking doing. That's what I gotta stop. I can't do that. Like, he's like, it's getting out of fucking hand.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I can't trust these people. Like, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Right.
He's like, so I'm just gonna have to hide this.
Mm.
So he like just suppressed it. And then it would come out later. Like, it's a really cool interview to listen to, because he really is good at like describing like everything he was thinking and going through and everything. And then he even talks about how, like, separately from the OCD point, like, he was sexually molested by his stepmother, and like his father would physically beat him and stuff. And he goes into all this detail of it, man. And you're like, there's so much messed up, fucked up shit,
Yeah.
you know? And then I watched another one with this guy. He was a schizophrenic, and he had been living with schizophrenia. And he described how he had gone to prison for like 4 or 5 years or something, because he was, wherever he was at, there was a girl being like molested something by like 10 guys in some building, right? And he could hear it happening. So he starts to go in there to stop it. And then he perceives that she sends him some telepathic message of like, don't come in here. If you do, it'll make it worse. You'll get killed, whatever. If you set the building on fire, they'll all run out. So he sets the building on fire and burns down this building, right? Well, it turns out there wasn't even anybody in there doing any of that. It was just some people in the building, like nothing to do with anything. And then I don't think anybody died, but he got like, you know, attempted murder or something like that. And
Arson.
they gave him arson, whatever. They gave him a choice of like, you can either, you could do like the plea of insanity, he said, but then they said you would be in there probably the rest of your life. So he just like, give me the 4 years. Right. And then he described like being on the street. And there was this one point where he was talking about being on the street, and there was some girl that he was trying to rescue, like kind of like a similar situation. So he spent like 3 weeks trying to build a boat by hand to like take it across the bay or some shit. And like, he's getting like these signals and information from like some psychic beings in some other dimension. So like every little thing he would hear, a car horn, would be some kind of binary code that would tell him some information.
Wow.
And so he was just describing it like it was normal. And the guy interviewing, just whoever the guy runs the channel, he's like, are you aware that is like crazy? Like, that's a delusion. It's not real. And the guy's like, yeah, I understand that. He's like, I realize that. He said, so he's like, he's like, I realize it's not real, but I also have to entertain it at the same time. So like in his mind, he has to both entertain it and also realize it's not real. It was crazy.
Wow. That's
and
tough.
I watched another one of this guy who was schizoaffective. So he would just have these, it was like basically like hyper bipolarism, right? And he would go into these extreme mood swings, like manic mood swings. And I watched another one of this girl. She was antisocial.
Hang on, I want to go back to that.
Autistic. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to go back to that one who is like building a boat by hand. Like, okay, you gotta.
I don't know if he was even actually building a boat.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, that was what he thought he was doing, I guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say is just like the amount of energy, you know, that you're putting into like whatever this delusion is that's going on, right? But if you really think about it, it's not that far off from what the average person experiences, you know, where you go into some delusion in your mind and you put so much fucking effort and energy into it that's actually distracting you from reality, from real life, you know?
We have these traditions which sort of channel, and we say average people. These are average people. But they're in extreme expression or extreme situations, obviously.
Yeah.
Because there really isn't anything that's not average person, if you think about it. Even the idea that people have of the elite, like, they're not the average person. They're actually just people. They're not fundamentally different than anybody else. They just have a different programming, a different environment they were brought up in, and they go through a lot of abuse too.
Yeah.
They're just part of a system, and they're educated to be in part of a system where they have lots of money, or they have lots of power, whatever the point is, right? it's interesting too, because like a lot of the people that the guy interviews are like living in Skid Row,
Yeah.
which, actually I haven't really looked up what that is. I just kind of had heard about it. I didn't really, what is Skid Row exactly? So I don't make assumptions.
It's like all the
It's
people
in
that
LA.
live
I was assuming it was in
tents.
San Francisco
Yeah,
for
it's
some
like
reason.
Tent City in LA. I think it's really close to Hollywood too. It's like you go one street over and it goes from like
And I thought it
places.
was like near the prison or something. There's like a reason it's there because it's near some sort of institution.
Mm.
So it says it's got about 9,000 to 15,000 homeless people. It's the largest stable, one of the largest stable populations in the United States. It's near LA.
Largest stable population of homeless.
Like where it's just constantly that.
Yeah. Like they can't even clear them out. That's crazy.
In 2005, hospitals and law enforcement agencies were discovered to be dumping homeless people on Skid Row.
Oh wow.
Wow.
They tried to clean it up with anti-camping ordinances.
Not that good.
But
Wow.
basically it's just a big area of like homeless people that they say homeless. I mean, obviously they live out there, right?
Yeah. It's that tent.
The homeless kid.
Basically.
Wow, you see that because it's like if people look at life from a very linear perspective instead of seeing it as a system, it's like systems thinking is not taught to the average person is not exposed to systems thinking, or if they are, it's a very limited definition of it. But when we look at this, is like this is a phenomena that's come up, Skid Row, and or this soft white underbelly stuff, and you hear these people who are just, let's say, kind of like outcasts from society, and you can get so trapped in it if you're looking at it going like, oh well, it's like you'll come up with what you think is a solution, but it's not a real solution. And so that's where I see the real value of self-perfected and the real value of what we're doing is that we're getting to the root of the system so that over time we can actually change that system, because anything else is not going to cut it. It's like anything that doesn't get to the very root of the system is just like some band-aid solution. It's like them dumping more homeless people on the side of the road in Skid Row or whatever. It's like it's just going to keep perpetuating the cycle. And that's what I mean. I'm sure a good amount of people listening to the podcast are aware of what is the root of the system, which is tree of life, tree of evil. But then being able to effectively share that, really living as that, the tree of life, that's the answer to it's going from it just being like the thing on the pamphlet to realizing, oh, I actually need to live this if I want to do something about it. Otherwise you just get trapped in these fucking cycles, and then you zoom around and you'll end up being one of these guys that is then like some guy living in America and being like, oh yeah, but I'm actually Muslim. And then you start praying to Allah, and that's your answer to it. It's like all these different offshoots instead of realizing like, nah, this is actually the way forward. And it's a bottoms up approach to it as well. Because it has to be.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like the education point is, it's obvious, like that's part of it, but and then looking at the bigger picture, it's like changing the system. But then also like, because what I see with a lot of like religion or spirituality and stuff, it's like, or any sort of thing that says that it's going to make your life better, it's like not looking at like if you don't have the destiny context, you have no fucking clue who you are. And you don't have any idea how your mind works. And if you don't know how your actual mind works, because that's stuff that like the system or like current education on like psychology, human development, like they don't actually fundamentally understand, like you have this system inside of you that is programmed, and then that's how basically you run the rest of your life. But if you don't know how to actually change that, like how does anything actually fundamentally change to then create like the bigger system that needs to change everything, right? So that's why, like, you know, when you come into this group, it's like the value of the information that you're getting is nothing literally like what's out there, because you're actually getting like the real truth of what is actually going on within you, and then how you can apply that, you know, all the things that we're saying, like actually make the real change for yourself to actually change your programming, which is then gonna, you know, down the line change your life and then the bigger system. So it's just like it's just, that's why it's like what Mitch was saying with no, like the solution, people have solutions, but unless you have this context, nothing is fundamentally going to work, because you don't actually understand like how you work. So
Like this is real value. Like when you're saying like the value of this information, this material, this is what real value actually is. And everyone's so concerned about value through the form of money or through, you know, feelings or energy or whatever. It's like the real value is, yeah, the destiny message, the principles, and then living it.
Mitch, you made a post. You made a post the other day that was like, it was a screenshot of some ad that you got. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was that? I didn't really understand what it was.
Yeah, could you explain that?
So I'm in, like, I look at a lot of self-development stuff. I just want to see like what is the system feeding people, and, you know, investigate everything, keep what's best. So I got an ad from some app. I don't know. One is called Headway, one is something else. But it's like, you know how they have some services where they'll give you like a book summary. And so instead of you going to read the book, it's like, here's the top 3 highlights from Atomic Habits. Here's the top 3 highlights from 4-Hour Work Week or whatever the fuck. And so the ad was like something along the lines of, imagine being able to just step away for 30 days and you come back totally changed and like able to manifest anything. And it's like, it's literally, I said in the ad, it's like, yeah, playing on people's desire, but really it's preying on people's desire, because it's people want to just fucking feel good, sit on the sidelines, not do fucking shit with their life, and somehow expect a reward. It's like the lottery mentality. Yeah. But it was like right in front of my eyes, them preying on it. And there's a bunch of people liking the post, like the actual ad itself, because, you know, people are like, oh my God, you mean I can just spend $97? I can stop working on my project because it is getting kind of stressful. And then I'll just step away, go into my little cave, and magically I'll somehow read these book summaries, and then I'll come back and I'll know what to do. It's like the only way you know what to do is by going and doing the fucking thing and then learning while doing it. And it's like, that's the feedback cycle. So they were intentionally removing the part that is the stressful part, where it's like, you have to actually go to fucking battle and attempt to get the result. It was like preying on the whole thing of people don't like failure and people want to fucking take vacation all the time. And magically that's going to get you your goal.
Yeah. And like, you actually have to understand it in order to get the result, because otherwise, like, and you understand by doing, I know that's what you said, but like getting a summary of a book, like, oh, here's 3 points from this book, boom, boom, boom. You're like, okay, but I don't get why. I don't understand.
No, you just have to do it for 30 days and not work.
Okay, all right. So 30 days, I don't work. And here's the main points from Atomic Habits. You have to do it consistently. Okay. All right.
No breaks.
No breaks. Oh, geez. I already took a 30-day break.
See, okay. What's interesting is because there's like levels to this shit, right?
There's levels to this shit.
It's like when you start to realize that words and vocabulary are important, and learning does, when you're learning the right things, it actually does give you more ability. But there's like level 1, which is like, okay, we're gonna go like fucking like beginner level all the way to like world changing level. So level 1 is like, you're like, oh, I gotta like read books, and then somehow that's magically gonna change my life. I remember Mayer at the self-perfected event when he was on stage. He said one line. I don't know how many people caught it, but I heard it because it's so fucking funny, because I relate to it. It's like, yeah, I like buy a book on Amazon, and then I just like put it on my shelf because like somehow the resonance will affect my resonance. It's so fucking funny, right?
Yeah.
And then the next part, what are you doing? Oh, nice. Food delivery. Well, that shows you guys. She literally put fucking food right next to me. I'm like, what are you doing? You know, oh, great. Okay, so that's level one.
Resonance,
He was in
the
the
resonance
zone.
of
Resonance
this
of the
guy.
oatmeal is gonna fill me up. I don't have to fucking eat it. It's bomb oatmeal. It has chocolate chips in it.
What kind of oatmeal do you guys make?
Yeah.
What kind of oatmeal?
Yeah. It's
the
like rolled
hot
oats.
cereal.
Yeah, they're just the classic rolled oats, but I just saw recently something about groats, and so I posted it on my Facebook to see like what the heck is this, and apparently it's less processed, like it's more of just like the whole oat itself instead of just a certain piece of the oat like the rolled oat is.
Mhm.
And so it has more nutrition, it has a higher nutritional value because it's less processed and it has all the parts still intact, but it takes longer to cook. So I was like, so then
Yeah.
I'd have to alter all my recipes that I use oats with, and I'm like,
Also, it's got a very different texture to it as well. You'll
Yeah.
be chewing on things versus like how oatmeal
Hmm.
kind of just dissolves in your mouth.
yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to share quick because I'm listening downstairs and I'm like, this is so good. Like,
Oh, the part about Gary Wilson?
no, fucking Gary, crazy guy. That was a weird description you gave of that guy.
Yeah.
Anyways, just more so about how, the solution is you taking responsibility for yourself. Well, it's cool because like people may not really understand like how can the solution to poverty or the solution to Skid Row, the solution to homeless people on Skid Row, how can the solution to that be me taking responsibility for my life? Like people maybe can't see how that's correlated, but think about it. If everybody took responsibility for their life, like really everybody, all their shitty programming, then besides the people on Skid Row, right? Then a lot of people would have the space and the attention to come up with actual solutions for the people on Skid Row that would fundamentally support them because they know what fundamentally supports someone to work through their program because they did it for themselves. But if you don't first do it for yourself, how are you supposed to come up with real solutions in the world that address the base programming? Because you've never addressed your base programming. And so it's just a really cool point to come back to, because every time you see some kind of video, like the ones that Cameron's talking about, like I watched that one that you were talking about and oh my gosh. Okay. I watched that video of that guy explaining his childhood and how fucked up it was. And then after the video was done, all of a sudden I had these intrusive thoughts from the recollection of his video. And I was like, I have to literally like process that point before I can even go about my day, because it was just traumatic listening to it. But people live that. People's lives are that. Like that, imagine how much it affected him if it just affected me just by watching him talk about it. And he wasn't even fazed talking about it. Like he was just sitting there saying it so matter-of-factly, like hardly any emotion, just saying this is what happened to me. And yet it affected me on such a deep level. And so it's like when we can really realize, like I was saying, when you see stuff like that, to bring it back, like the practical application is just your process. Like whenever you see a video of something crazy happening in Ukraine or something crazy happening on Skid Row, or like something where it's like something happening in the world and you feel urged to do something about it, then the thing that you can do about it is take more responsibility of your process. Take more responsibility of your programming. Hey, buddy. He learned how to clap yesterday. and he was really into it. It was so great. He just started clapping, and I'm like, Mitchell's like, oh, nice, you're clapping. Like, it's normal. And I'm like, no, he's never done that before. So it's kind of
It's
But-
cool
That's
because like
like-
from the dad perspective, like you don't see it. Like a lot of times Katie will tell me like, oh yeah, Caius is doing this, this, and this. And I'm like, really? And then I'll see him do it or whatever, or like yeah, it's pretty cool. One thing Caius likes to do is he likes to wear this fanny pack, this like little tiny, I think it's like a kid's size fanny pack, and he'll like bring it to me and be like, meh. So I'll put it on him, right? Or he'll bring me his shoes and be like, meh. And like he'll like want to wear his shoes or whatever. He's really
So funny.
communicating like through like what he wants.
That's
That's
awesome.
hilarious.
Right on. Okay.
Thanks for
okay.
sharing that, Jess.
So, so yeah, to bring it all together, right? It's you got the levels. So there's like beginner level where you're just like thinking, yeah, I get a book and the book's resonance will somehow change me, or whatever. I'll read a book and somehow that's going to change my life. Then you got the people who realize like, oh, I can actually read. Well, they think they can read. And then you like start to realize, oh, I can take what's from this book and I can go like attempt to make different things happen in my life. Then you got the people who are like, oh shit, I can't actually read. I need to actually reprogram myself so I can have a vocabulary, so I can read. That's cool.
That's the problem with speed reading. People are trying to shortcut the process, and it's like that you didn't change your ability to understand anything.
Right.
You're just trying to get through the thing faster. It's kind of like the slower version of that take 30 days to read the summaries thing.
Right. It's the
But-
same exact point. It's like without Technotutor, you're not gonna fucking change
Same
anything.
thing with phonics, like learning phonics. Like you're not really putting the words in effectively. You're just learning a way to sort of try to figure things. Can I tell this real quick story before you go
Yeah.
back? Max was doing his Technotutor the other morning, like 2 days ago, I think. And he got the word reunion. Right. And he was asking me about the word reunion. We were just talking about it. And I was explaining to him, like, the word, he already kind of understood a lot of it, but we were just talking about it. We were talking about the point of like the word union, to bring things together, to join things, and then reunion is like to do it again. And so like how people get together, they call it a reunion and so forth. There's other ways of using the word. And he was like, oh yeah, I understand now. It's like the word reunited. And those are connected. He could see that those were like connected, right? And it was really cool because the other day, we don't often play like a lot of video games or anything like that, but every once in a while, like we'll find some kind of cool game or something like that's not too intense, and we'll play it, like me and Max and Seneca. And so we were playing some game the other night, and there was some type of, I forget what the game was. It was like some little adventure game, and he was like really enjoying it, and he was like, I'm so glad to be reunited with playing these adventure games. Right. And it was just cool to see how he had taken that word and now he was using it. Like, he's not using it in a way to impress anybody. It's just become a part of his vocabulary. Like from doing the Technotutor to like 2 days later, basically, he was able to express himself in a very specific way. And it was really cool because he has a lot of self-awareness of what he's thinking and what he's feeling and so forth. And I was like, really, are you really enjoying playing this right now? And he was like, yeah. He goes, well, also like, he goes, imagine like when you were a boy and like your dad wanted to sit down with you and play like a fun game together. Wouldn't that just make you excited? And wouldn't that be a lot of fun? And I was like, yeah, it would. He's like, yeah, that's how I feel about it. And it was just cool because he could like express all that to me at 6 years old, and like I never would have been able to express myself like that, and so just to kind of tie it into what we were going into, it's like even giving children that more expansive vocabulary and real understanding of things allows them to be more expressive. And so it's like they won't accept things in the same way that other children will. And it doesn't mean that a physically strong adult can't overpower a child. It's not going to fundamentally change that per se, but because there's always that point. But then you got to look at, why is that parent why is there programming like that? And you can see if you can start changing that point where people are able to express themselves and not go into anger as a physical expression of violence instead of just expressing the anger, you know, and like talking about why you're angry and what's the issue and so forth, right? And I mean, like one of those software underbelly videos, the guy was talking about how it was that one where the guy was saying his stepmother sexually molested him when he was like 14. And ever since that point, like the stepmother, anytime the boy would like talk back to her or do anything, she would go upstairs and talk to the dad, like whisper to him or something. And the dad would come out. The guy's like, I don't know what she would say to him. And then he would just start beating on the kid, like physically just like wailing on him, beating him up, like giving him bloody nose, that kind of stuff, you know? And so like even that father, you can see all the dynamic of like emotion and anger and fear and all that stuff going on in there, not being able to just like have a real communication between all those people, you know? And plus the stepmother, like, why was she doing all that weird sexual stuff with the kid? Like what was going on there? And like Christine was saying, it's like being able to understand who you are and like how your programming actually works and not just go along with it, you know? And so when you study destiny, they talk about demons, right? And they explain how now there are no more demons. There's no physical entities that are possessing people and making them do crazy shit. A lot of that actually happened in the past, but now it's no longer that. It's like your demons are your mind, and they're you, and they're equal to you, and you're equal to it. And so it's you. That doesn't mean you're fully aware in the moment of everything that you're doing, but the whole point of the process is to start taking that apart and understanding, so you're not possessed in those moments, you know? And the possession isn't something taking over you, it's you allowing it, you know?
Well, this is fascinating because, like I was saying, there's like levels to this, right? And there's a couple of key parts where you have to make a leap, because your willpower can only do so much. Like those people in the software underbelly videos and stuff, is like they could be stable enough to sit there and like do an interview and even express how they see things in their mind. But then the leap after that is then that person being supported to actually physically change their programming. Because that's a critical piece.
It reminds me of this other point that there was a Black girl who was anti-social autistic, and she was considered a sociopath, which doesn't mean she's going around like trying to hurt people. It just means like she doesn't relate to her emotions the same way most people do, is how she explained it. It's like she's more thinking about emotions and not like feeling them per se. That's how she described it. But the reason I brought it up was because she had been sexually abused a lot when she was like 9 years old, 7, I don't remember what exactly, but like a bunch. And how she had basically suppressed all of that. And you could see like that's obviously to a large degree where all of her points stemmed from. But as like a young adult, she would go to therapists, and she had been through 12 therapists. And a lot of times they would just, I don't know what's the word. They would not want to work with her. Right. And she said the last one she went to, she described to the person all of the points that she's facing, and then also the sexual abuse that she had encountered or that had happened to her. And she said the psychologist was just like, I don't know how to help you, and tried to like refer to somebody else. So going back to that point, we were talking about like the solutions in the system, no one knows what the fuck they're doing. They really don't know. Like, it's just like, well, there's this drug that sort of like makes you kind of be able to cope with it, but it doesn't really fundamentally change anything. And the problem that I see is the system is becoming more and more, it's like a pressure situation. Because now we're looking at like the war in Ukraine. Did you guys hear about that whole point with Biden activating reserve troops to go to Europe?
I heard about it, but can you fill in the audience?
No,
I don't know the whole details of it. Maybe you can look it up while we're, I could do it, but I'm not going to talk at the same time. Something, I don't know exactly the details of it. Like, oh, we're going to war. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but regardless, what's in the news is that he's activating reserve troops. So what is that bringing up in everybody's mind? Right.
Yeah.
And then you have all this stuff with like the government going to the next step of like the central bank digital currencies. Again, I don't know the details. I just look at what the headlines are, what's being impulsed, right? And then you have the point with like the BRICS countries creating their own gold-backed digital currency or something. Have you heard about that? That's going on.
Yeah, Brexit.
So I'm just seeing all these little points. And then you have the inflation points, and you've got all of these different points that are like essentially making it so that even if you're a quote normal person where everything's kind of working for you, it's like everything is just even bringing all of those points, because like even the normal people, there's still all kinds of weird stuff going on in their lives and in their childhoods and in their families and in their relationships and so forth, right? And it's because of that we allow things like war and all this other shit on a bigger scale. And the problem is that we go and we blame politicians. We blame them for being corrupt, but like they're just normal people like everybody else. They're just doing what everybody else is doing at a much bigger scale because their programming was to be in that stage. It's like blaming the World Economic Forum for controlling us, when in reality, it's like we're not even directing our own minds effectively. So I'm sorry for sidetracking the point, Mitch, but it's like you go through these levels and it's like at each point there's like some kind of solution that you think you're participating in, but ultimately that's going to break down because it's not self-realization.
Right. And that's so those are like the leaps people have to make. I mean, if you want to have any sort of effect in the fucking world, and everybody really ought to want to do that, it's like we're here as life and we've accepted something less than life. So as life, we can just direct ourselves to have that influence. But there's a level. So it's like, then after you realize, okay, I can actually physically change my programming. So I'm using TechnoTutor, doing self-forgiveness. Then the next level after that is like, you actually then starting to really take it on. Because one thing to just use the tools and you're like, oh, cool, I used it and I got a raise or whatever, but you're just still participating in the system as is. Then there's a next level of like actually starting to take a stand. And at this level, what's fascinating, this is actually why I even brought it up, is because like last night I was after our clubhouse, whatever, I got home and I was like just finding some books that I haven't read in a while. And I was like, yeah, I just wanted to sit there and for a little bit just read. And I was watching Aristotle while Jess was making dinner. I was like, cool, what are some cool books I could just read out loud to Aristotle? So I grabbed the book Anti-Fragile. And I hadn't read it in a while. And it was like, so you got the difference between someone who's like, I'm going to read a little book summary and fucking magically that's going to make my life work, versus I spent the last 6 days going all out. Like every week, it's like I'm on front lines, talking to people, meeting people, building business, supporting people, all that. And then for a little bit, I like read. And it was so interesting because in maybe 4 or 5 pages, I had like all of these insights into where I was like ineffectively focusing, or where I can like focus now, or it like was helping me put it into context, everything I'm doing. And it was so cool because from my perspective, I'm not going to say I needed that, but it was very helpful for me to almost like come up, take a breath of air, be like, okay, wait, this is where we're going. Okay, cool. And then back in. But that's the part where for years I was like thinking I was doing that because I would go get a bunch of books and read a bunch of books and all that. And sure, I got some helpful ideas, but now it's like, it reminds me of how apparently, I don't know if it's true, but apparently Bill Gates will do those like thinking vacations where he'll go for like a day or two into the fucking cabin and read like all the top books and all the, and it's like, that's his time to like focus. Again, I don't know to what extent if that's true or not. I watched the Netflix documentary on him, and so whatever. But I do see the value of when you first have made that stand and you're actually applying it, then a little bit throughout it, reading, getting some information, so you can use that. And really, I'm just looking at it for more context so that I can more effectively support people and more effectively see like how we can change the system. So that's then that level. But then the ultimate level, let's say, and this is where now as a group we've hit this, is so there's like 3 levels that I'm seeing. There's one is where you just have a bunch of programming that was given to you by the system, and you might even be trying to change it, but you're not fucking changing it. So you're still just resonating the same fucking thing, keeping the system in place, and the system's collapsing. Then there's a level where you start to actually change your programming. So now you're changing your resonance. You're changing what's coming up for you. Then there's the next level, which is where you're like changing that resonance and then now starting to influence other people. And then the real spot that you want to get to is where you change your programming, change your resonance to help others change your programming, change your resonance to help others do that too. That's like actual effective support now, is where you're at cause over influencing others who are influencing others who are influencing others. And that is, so I was looking up this too, because I was from reading, it's like you add your vocabulary. So there's a concept called emergence. Have y'all heard of this? I'm sure you have, but
Yeah.
for the average listener, maybe not. But it's like on Wikipedia, some associated words with it. It's under the umbrella of what's called complex systems. So there's different words like self-organization, collective behavior, networks, pattern formation, systems theory or cybernetics, nonlinear dynamics, and game theory. So those are examples of like how these interconnected parts are related. And there is there's ways to have an effect in a system. So when we look at Skid Row, for example, or this guy who's a clown because he had OCD as a kid because he wasn't supported, or this like horrible shit that's happening, or Sound of Freedom, there's the fake version of trying to do the emergence thing and make it work, and then there's the actual version. Did any of y'all see Plandemic 3?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was thinking about this the other day because I see like what the system is promoting is like potential solutions. And there's some things where some of it's interesting, right? You got like the whole gin approach to things, or you got the like Joe Dispenza and seeing some of these other people where they're like, your thinking changes reality. And it's like they have little bits and pieces that is like, hey, that's kind of cool. But at a core, it's not taking into account the system. So I got targeted with this video on YouTube about like some Joe Dispenza meditation. And it's pretty fascinating because he'll do events where people will come in with like stage 4 cancer and they will leave and have cured their cancer because of the like collective coherence is how he puts it. And so I'm not saying that I don't think the people had their cancer cured, but the moment I heard that, I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. But then I thought of, you remember that part in Plandemic 3 where there's that group in China that's like allowed to practice their meditation Qigong, but then the leaders of that group are like taken and fucking tortured and abused. So it's like, if let's say Joe Dispenza had the solution, well, sure, people can fucking meditate and heal themselves from cancer and maybe even cooler things that we didn't even know. But who's gonna fucking get into politics and change the laws and influence the voter base? Who's going to take responsibility for making sure every last home has access to Technotutor and DIP? Who's going to take the responsibility for making sure that people see the value in like changing the system, supporting families and all that? So that's where I'm seeing it. It was so fascinating because I was like, I see how people could get sucked into this. I bet if I didn't find these tools or whatever, I would have loved the Joe Dispenza thing because it's like, wow, there's like science to how he's healing people. It's so cool. But if you don't look at the whole system, it's like there's the missing of the point of how the entire system is clamping down on people, and they're trying to push the central bank digital currency, and they're pushing this, totalitarian agendas and the communist stuff.
And meditation's not going to fucking change that.
Right. And people will get duped into being like, no, but I felt so good. I felt love. I felt like I connected with the planet and I sent out this vibration of healing. But none of that fucking compares to you sitting face to face with somebody saying, look, here's the solution. And you actually chat with them and help them get bought in on it.
Yeah.
So they get to that level too, where they're like, oh, this makes fucking sense. I'm going to also now go do this and share this with people. That's the actual part that people got to get to. And along the way, there's all these fucking booby traps and stuff that'll catch people. But it's like, we have it. And what's really cool now is that you see different people in the group really stepping up. And it's like after the event, like the event IC did, I mean, we knew it would, but where people are now connected at an even better level. So the emergence thing is happening at a higher level. And it's like we talk about a train, where at the beginning the train's moving slow and people can hop on and hop off. But at a certain point, that train's moving so fast, like people are running to just try and catch up and get on it. I see it's like we've hit another level of the train's momentum. And it's exciting because that's where it's headed. And it's like all the stuff that these people want anyway, the success, the money, the happiness, the world peace, all these things. It's like, this is the train to get there. And I would encourage people fucking get on it and then really, really take it on to not just get another person in, but to get that person to help other people.
That was great. That was great. It's funny when you were talking about like coming up, taking a breath, then going back in. I was like, Mitch is a whale. He's a whale. Mitch is my favorite animal. He's an orca. He's a killer whale. Yeah. But yeah, it's, you know, even if you're going to like, I don't know, someone like a Joe Dispenza or Tony Robbins or whomever, it's like, okay, cool, you got some great information from them, but like, does that then become your savior or like your one point of like, this is where I'm gonna get all the healing that I need or whatever, and then like what happens when that person disappears, right? Like what we're doing is creating equality in every single point of the system, where it's like you have all the information and knowledge and the ability to understand all that information so that it's actually best. And what's really cool about it, what's really great about it is that then you can see for yourself, where it's like, oh, I don't need to go to so and so for how to raise my children in the best way. It's like, I studied the material and I can see for myself, this makes sense, right? And I'm actually actively pushing that point within myself of like, I want to do this in the best way. And then that also includes you're building the community as well, because you have the understanding of it's an ecosystem, right? An ecosystem affects not just yourself, but everything, every part of the system, everything involved. It's sort of like, I'll give you an example. Cam, you have a tractor, right? I was on this tractor, right? And just learning the tractor, how to make it function effectively. And it was funny because there's so many different parts within a tractor where if the PTO is engaged, it's not going to turn on, you know, or if it's if you cut the fuel line and you didn't replace it, it's not going to turn on. If, you know, there's so many different pieces where it's like, this has to be exactly right in order for it to work effectively, right? And you have to know all these different parts and pieces. And, you know, that's really how raising your family, how creating a world that's best. There's all these different parts within the ecosystem. It's not just, okay, I put the fuel in, it should turn on. Like, no, like that's one piece. Yes, you need to do that. It's like, I talk to people all the time. I'm like, okay, you know, what would you see as like important for raising an effective child? Well, the parents have to be involved. Yeah, obviously, right? What else? Because there's homes where the parents are
See, but
involved.
they'll do some research study that shows when the children have the parents involved, they have better outcomes. And then they'll like do a whole like huge $1 million campaign of like promoting the parents being involved, you know, and you're
Right.
like, that's one part of it, you know,
Right.
it's not the whole
Like,
thing.
Like, obviously that's necessary, but that does not create the end
Or like they're
result
like, you got to read to
necessarily.
your kids. It's like, that's part of it.
Right.
know?
Right. And it's interesting because, you've seen this and I've seen it as well. Like, you go into these homes where the parents are wealthier, and they have the time to be there with their kids and all that. Their kids aren't any different really
Right.
than anybody else's kids. It's like you go to enough of those homes, you're like, okay, so you didn't do anything different really. That's not in
It's
itself.
just a different environment, basically.
Right. Right. Which the environment is important. That's part of it though. It's just part of it. Right. And so what we're talking about here is like, okay, let's create the entire ecosystem to be best, where every part is accounted for. And that may sound to some people like a tall order, but it's actually really simple. It's actually really simple. You're just taking responsibility. It'd be the same thing as like, you have anything that's functioning. You have a bicycle that's functioning. It's like, okay, it has pedals on it. Oh, it's got the chain. The chain is lubricated. The chain is connected to both parts of, the front where the pedals are and to the back wheel, right? You've got the brakes on it. Like, if it's going to run effectively, you have to take account of every part. If one thing comes undone, the chain, you've anybody who's ridden a bike for any period of time, like you've had a bike. Well, I don't know. I've had a bike. I've had multiple bikes, but the chain comes undone. You're like, fuck. And then you got to get up and you got to fix the chain. You're like, okay, all right, cool. But it's like any little thing that's not accounted for will fuck up the whole system. Why wouldn't we take the same approach when it comes to life? Our entire society, our entire like humanity, like, hello, like, why are we leaving it up to like, well, there's just too many fucking pieces,
Well, and then it's like, we're kind of taking the approach of like, let's not even direct any of it.
There's also a cognitive dissonance that your life is even a system. You know what I mean? Like, people don't actually correlate that so the way that you were raised is going to have like a specific type of person that you become, and then that's going to determine like what you do as an adult, and that's actually within itself a whole system. Like, people don't want to admit that, because then they have to recognize and realize like, oh, I didn't do the best. Like, for example, if you're a parent, it's like then having to be self-honest and realize like, oh, I potentially like fucked up my kid to some degree, you know what I mean? And no one wants to actually admit that. Or like, as an adult, you're like, oh, I just want to blame my parents because they fucked me up, you know what I mean? And I don't, now I don't want to change my system because now I'm here and like, I'm just going to try to get through and survive or whatever. So it's like, yeah, it's just anyway.
Well, but even that point, get through it and survive, that's the system.
Right.
That's focusing everyone on survival. So we don't consider how even the system itself is keeping us in that pattern. It's extensive. That's why it has to be 1+1, and people have to support each other, like you said, influence people, but it's really about supporting people to see like, okay, this is how you take responsibility for these points, and of course it's going to be harder for people who are doing it first, but I mean, isn't it worth it?
Oh man, I was talking with someone yesterday, and we were talking about like clearing land, what it takes to clear land. And they were telling me how on their property they cleared like all these cacti. I was gonna say cactuses, but all these cacti, all these bushes, all these different things, right? And how they had to do it all by hand, right? And they're like, the next person that gets the property is all they have to do is really maintain it. There's still a lot of work to be done, but you're just maintaining. You don't have to do like the amount of work
point, yeah.
The initial point. That's like, if you're doing it by hand, it's years of work. It's it's much harder work, right? And it's sort of the same way as like, you're going into first gear, into a car. It's like, that's the hardest gear, from like if you're just driving, like that's the most challenging gear. And then after that, everything is smooth sailing. You can go a lot faster. You can go, you pretty much don't even have to go back to first gear once you're in second gear. Right?
It's like the train, getting a train to be stopped at a fucking station to going full out.
Right.
So it's work. It's fucking work. Yeah. But like Cam said, like, isn't it worth it? What else are you gonna fucking do? Wait till World War III starts? Like, come on.
I don't
Um,
even know if that's what it would take, honestly. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah. It's
like
more.
we're already at a point where it's like constant war, constant, more poverty, more abuse, more this. Like, there's a Bernard blog where he's like, you're basically now gonna see the acceleration of like the physical manifestation of the mind, where like you'll see more and more fucked up shit happening. And that's really just like, I guess what Cam was alluding to, of like the demons, like your own demons are just going to become physically manifested, right? Through you not being able to direct yourself. And that's just basically what we're seeing right now. And it's kind of cool because you can see people are like more questioning things, but then to get to the point of like the level of responsibility of, I can do something about it, like that's where then some, our group comes in and the people that are in our group come in, because you have to go look for those people and say, hey, there's actually like a real way where we can actually change things.
Yeah. Sounds like we've come to the end of this episode.
Sounds like the sound of freedom.
Real
Right.
freedom.
Except
Freedom.
without the
what-
chipping. Have you guys heard there's like they are promoting like chipping your kid or IDing your kid? Like that's the solution.
Oh, I was like, I chip Caius a lot. Like he loves when I'm eating chips. He'll come up and get a chip from me. And he likes, because I like to make this salsa. You guys ever had it? Where it's like sour cream with some salsa on top and then some candied jalapenos, right? So Caius sees me eating that. So he likes to come in. If I give him a chip, he'll be like, he'll like want to dip it. Even if I don't have any dips, I have to explain to him. I was like, I don't have any dip right now. He's like, oh. It's amazing how much he can understand.
That's hilarious.
He loves the
That's
dip.
the only kind of chipping that we want.
Yeah. So that I do chip my kids, but it's just chips.
That's hilarious.
No other chips.
That's hilarious.
Oh, there was one more thing.
Oh, your secret thing?
No.
What happened to your secret thing? Did you
You're transitioning.
Did you get that secret
Oh,
thing
yeah.
in there?
Yeah, it's in there.
Oh, okay.
No, there was something I was gonna say about the chip thing that threw me off.
ID.
Yeah, that'll come back to me. But I wrote this down too. Of
It chipped you up.
this idea of there being like skin in the game.
Mm.
This is an anti-fragile book, but I found it was very interesting because you'll have these people that are at a point of authority in the system. And in the book, the author, he goes like, yeah, you'll have these Davos attending, professors, whatever, who are sharing their ideas of economic policy that should work, but they don't actually have skin in the game. So it doesn't fucking matter if it goes good or bad. And it's like that. So his approach is he's like noticing if you're hearing advice from someone on some sort of policy change or whatever, if the person actually has skin in the game, that is like more, there's more merit to their idea. I'm like giving a very simple explanation of it, but I've seen that too, where this is the ultimate skin in the game, is you taking responsibility as life and you sharing this with other people. And that's why all these other solutions won't work. Like how you were alluding to, like, oh yeah, you got to spend more time with the kids. And then they'll give all this examples and studies and push, yeah, spend more time with your kids. Great. But it's like, it's fake. It's empty because it's not actually done from a starting point of practically what makes sense. And would that person live that themselves? And all the other associated points to it. So I thought that's a cool idea too, where as people in this group are out there front lines talking to people, supporting people, taking responsibility, just so you can really see it is like you do have skin in the game. There is something at stake. And as you have that, that's also like responsibility in its truest sense. You're not giving away your power. You're not like looking for something outside yourself. you're really living it. And that's not to be overlooked, because there's power in that.
That's a great point, actually, about, okay, first off, we have skin in the game because we live here on this planet, right? And we actually care about how the next generation turns out, versus like, oh, I'm gonna die and like, whatever. It's like, no, we're having children. You guys already have children, but we're having children, me and my wife.
Well, you have a child,
But
she's still on the inside.
that's true. There we go.
She hasn't made her debut Earthside yet.
Did you hear the way she said debut? she pronounced it very American. But yeah, it's funny because she's like, she moves around in there, and I feel her, like when I'm in the bed next to Christine, she's like, I feel her punch. I'm like, whoa. Christine's like, you felt that? I'm like, yeah.
Dang.
I'm not even like trying to feel the belly. But what I'm saying is, there's skin in the game, as in we actually care about, man, it's so challenging to get this point across, because there's a lot of parents who they'll claim that they care about their kids, but then it's like their kids are a secondary thought. It's like they'll put their kid in daycare for 8 hours a day, or I've seen parents put their kids in daycare for 12 hours a day. And I'm not saying that they're not trying, maybe they have jobs and they really have to work because their spouse or their partner is no longer there, whatever the case may be. But I'm just saying, there are a lot of parents that will claim that they care, but the actions that they're taking is really disregarding the child. Actually, it's placing them as a secondary thought, or even not even a secondary thought. And it's again looking at all those pieces of what is going into that child and how they're developing and what's going to create the best result for that child going forward in the future, right? And we're actually considering those things. And I see that others can see that we're actually considering that. They want to be a part of this. There are parents out there who maybe they're trying to consider all these things, but they didn't have all the pieces yet. They couldn't see all the pieces because it's not exactly obvious to a lot of people.
Well, there's no instruction. There's just a lot of opinions, but it's all based on someone's ideas. It's not based on reality.
Right. But then they see us and it's like, oh, you guys are clearly doing something right. This is, I want to be a part of this. And what's really cool about it, another really cool point about it is just going through the study ourselves, like through Destiny and, using TechnoTutor, seeing all of that. It's like, it becomes so clear. It's like, it's almost so obvious now where it's just like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to do it this way. Or of course I'm going to change these things. And I'm bringing all this up, all this context, really just to say that we are creating a world, not just for ourselves, but for everyone involved. Like we have the most skin in the game, really, because we want it for ourselves, for our children, for everyone, because we can see all those moving parts. And it's clear to us like that's necessary. Like if there's any part that's unaccounted for, that's going to come back and have an effect, right? And so if you're watching this, you don't have any skin in the game. Like if you're just watching and this is like entertainment for you, like you don't have any skin in the game, actually join what we're doing, meaning go and try to fucking persuade somebody.
People this week, like that's skin in the game. Like
exactly.
Look at you fucking 100x what you're doing.
Right. Like, if you don't have
Yeah,
technical,
do the process for yourself and then share that with people. It's that
Right.
simple.
right? And
Right.
then you'll see
there's a lot of fear and stuff that comes up, resistance, but then you have the tools to process that.
right, and you'll also see how much it affects you and like the value that you get out of it. You'll want to share that. You'll want to, you know, and then you'll have even more skin in the game where it's just like, okay, this is valuable for me. This makes sense. And then you know, you have a kid, you're doing this process, you want to share with other people. Like that is what's going to change things for everyone. So get
There's
yourself
a
out.
really cool audio too. If people haven't listened to it, it's number 29 in The Soul of Money. And I was listening to it yesterday about how the money system and the body are really, they really ought to be mirrors of each other, but like a healthy body, not a cancerous body. Because right now the earth and money and physically how it's all been structured is just a few at the top get all of it. It's like a very fucked up situation. And that's why we see Skid Row and all this stuff coming up. Whereas what we're here to do is educate everyone, get into politics, and then change the money system so that everyone is at least taken care of. And then everyone's educated, so then we can create way cooler shit. But it's like, look at your body. Is your heart ever not giving blood? Is your brain ever not working? You know, is your liver ever not working? It's like it's always giving. But that's us standing here as this group is just constant giving. And you realize there's always more to give. It's so cool. That's like a thing that I never realized until I was actually doing this. You can always give more. I always thought as a kid, if you give too much, you're going to burn out. If you give too much, someone will fuck you over. But it's like, you can literally just always give. It doesn't mean like in giving, there's like an asterisk with it. It's not like, oh, well, I'm just going to give of myself and I'll go volunteer at a charity and feed the homeless and this and that. It's like, no, giving for real. And sometimes giving is giving someone, you know, it's like fucking challenging somebody. Or sometimes giving is stepping away from certain past responsibilities you had because you're doing it out of guilt and it wasn't actually going to solve anything. But when you find the real thing and you can give that, it's like that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're going to keep fucking doing it. It's going to be great.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, y'all. So go out there and give.
Yeah.
And, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
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 Bye.